Hey, good people. Today we're going to be taking a look at the mildly controversial Voice to Parliament. Australians will be given their first chance to alter the Constitution in about 4 decades on the 14th of October when we go to a referendum vote. There are two competing campaigns to this referendum. There's the yes side and the vote no side. And whilst I do have my own bias, I'm going to try and present you just the facts and information from both the yes side and the no side and poke holes in both of them. I'm also going to present you with information specifically about referendums and some of the surrounding controversy to the whole debate. To start off with, let's actually take a look at what the proposal is. I'm going to read the proposal fast because I think everybody needs to have heard it at least once before they go and vote. Chapter 9, Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples. 129. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. In recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, there shall be a body to be called Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. 2. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. 3. The Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers, and procedures. So that is what we're going to be asked to vote on, and it's going to appear on a ballot form that looks a little bit something like this. And thus enters our first piece of controversy. You can write yes if you approve this message. You can also tick if you approve this message. You can write no if you disapprove, but you cannot put a cross if you disapprove. The No campaign has suggested that this is unfair, as you can put a tick but you can't put a cross. However, the AEC, which has a strong track record of proven and fair elections, has rebutted this, saying that this is the way that it's been for a long time and there's been no cause for concern. I understand the No campaign's concern. If a tick counts as a yes, then why does a cross not count as a no? But if I was counting votes for the AEC and I came across a cross, I couldn't be certain what the intentions of that voter were. With a tick, I can be pretty certain they approve. With a cross, people often fill out forms and put a cross in the box to say, no, I don't have heart disease. So I happen to agree with the AEC on this. I think that the reasoning is sound. Okay, let's poke some holes in this proposal. Section 2 talks about matters that relate to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So one of the questions that's thrown up by the No campaign and by myself is what matters relate to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and what matters don't relate to Aboriginal and TSI, because taxation relates, welfare relates, parking tickets, Port Authority. I can't think of a matter that actually doesn't relate to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Point 3 introduces what the No campaign sees as its strongest argument against the referendum, which is the lack of clarity and detail surrounding the composition, functions, and powers of the voice. We don't know how many people are going to be on this board. We don't know what their function is specifically going to be, apart from a voice to Parliament. We don't know where its powers start and end. We don't know what its budget's going to be. That can change over successive governments. At the moment it's Labor, but soon it'll be Liberal. All of this doubt and uncertainty is what's fueling the No campaign. And Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia and the leader of the Yes campaign, has had many opportunities to clear up this uncertainty, having done many interviews, and seems to not acknowledge the seriousness of this point.
But you're at the end of the day, you're asking people to change the Constitution. You're asking people to trust you or to trust Canberra to make the right decision here. And no offence, but I'm not sure how much goodwill there is towards our politicians.
Well, I'm asking Australians to trust themselves and their own judgment. And that's why people who
Their judgment is, we don't get this. We don't know what it is. It's wishy-washy. There's this voice, but I don't know, it doesn't have any real power. It doesn't have any real legs. It can change over time and might look different in a decade to what it is now. And that scares people.
Well, that's why when people have looked at this, they've come to a positive position. Every faith group
But I'm not sure people who are undecided and who are no are people who simply haven't looked at it. My parents don't understand it. They've looked at it. Their group of friends have looked at it and don't understand it. The majority of people who write into us at a current affair, our office doesn't get it. That is a massive problem.
Well, it's just an advisory group. It's not more complicated than that. It's an advisory group on matters affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Now, that was a rather long clip, but I didn't want to edit Mr. Albanese to make it sound like he said something that he didn't say. But one of the issues that I noticed that is within this conversation and across the board is the frequent use of platitudes. He says that it's simple and uncomplicated, as if simple things are inherently good and complicated things are to be avoided. Therefore, this must be good, but that's not a feature, it's a bug. This proposal is so simple that we don't even know how many people are going to form this voice or how they will be chosen. These are simple questions that should have been answered before this was even proposed. The next thing that everyone should know about is the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I think everyone should have heard it at least once or read it. Links in the description, I'll read it now and I'll speed it up for you. This is the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Notice at the top it says document 14, that'll be relevant later on. We, gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent islands, and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion. The ancestral tie between the land, or Mother Nature, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom remain attached thereto, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or, better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That peoples possessed a land for 60 millennia, and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years. With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionally, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not innately criminal people. Our children are aliened from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them, and our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967 we were counted. In 2017 we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. So, that is the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I've read it to you. You can read it for yourself. It sounds to me like a genuine, heartfelt plea from the heart for structural change. And though this is one page, there is a news report that says that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is actually not one page, but some 26 or 18 or 20. It changes a little bit depending on which news source you're listening to. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so news reporter Peter Credlin from Sky News, under a Freedom of Information Act, acquired these 100-something pages that inform the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Now, Sky News acknowledges that it is technically correct to say that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is one page, and I happen to agree that it is one page. What they're asserting is that the pages that they acquired from the NIAA under a Freedom of Information Act, when they requested for the Uluru Statement from the Heart, they received all these pages. Now, this is document 14 here, you can see in the top right hand corner, and then you can see further down, document 14 is repeated a few times. Now, the reason that they are claiming that it is 26 pages is if I scroll down through all of these, eventually we get to the final pages, which are all titled Document 14, and it culminates at these 3 pages here, being Document 14, Roadmap 1, Roadmap 2, and Roadmap 3. They all have Document 14, and that is why Peter Credlin, Sky News, and people from the No campaign are claiming that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is not one page, but 26, because when they requested the Uluru Statement from the Heart from the NIAA using a Freedom of Information request, they got document 14, which included the Uluru Statement from the Heart and all these other documents. Now, these other documents informed the Uluru Statement from the Heart, But I happen to agree. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is one page. It's what Canberra is considering. This roadmap and the supporting documents that come with it, as document 14, are not technically what the government is considering. Now, having said that, that is how I see it as being technically correct. The Uluru Statement is one page. The Yes campaign would also agree with that because the No campaign is capitalizing on the fear of the unknown. And I don't think that's technically a wrong thing to do because there is a lot of unknowns and there is a genuine fear of that. Is it wrong for them to do that? That's a moral choice that you'll have to decide for yourself. Now, to be fair to the No campaign, I think there is some credibility to their concerns. Whilst the Uluru Statement from the Heart is only one page, and this is 26, and technically it is only one page, the No side understands that this document is the one that informed the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So were the referendum to be a yes in the end, and it were passed and constitutionally changed, these are the documents that we fairly believe will inform future decisions once the referendum were decided to be affirmed. So we can see here that we're at the culmination of Roadmap 1. We started off with the Uluru Statement from the Heart, now we're at the national campaign, and soon there'll be a referendum. Roadmap 2 shows how after the referendum is complete, the voice will be created, and then this will culminate in a joint parliamentary commission on Makarrata Commission. The Makarrata Commission will become the umpire that will make some decisions, and I'm doing my best to interpret here. So if you know more about this, please let me know in the comments. The Makarrata Commission will become the umpire. They will make some decisions about the future of First Nations voice and the creation of a First Nations nation is what I think I can see here. And then as to how the two parties, being the current national parliament and government, and how the First Nations nation will then interact. That's my best interpretation. But if that's truly what the intent is, and people were given that information and decided to vote on that information, I think people would vote differently to how they might be currently voting. And I think people would like to know if that's what they're really voting on. Now, there's plenty of other noteworthy information contained within these 26 pages, but I'm only going to touch on a couple that really stand out. This page here is titled Invasion, and it talks about the true history of Australia. Now, my question, as always, is not what is true, but who gets to decide. And that's why I put true in inverted commas. This section here is particularly interesting because it talks about land rights and the epic struggle of Eddie Mabo. Back in 1992, Eddie Mabo went to the High Court of Australia and legally overturned the term terra nullius, which means land belonging to nobody. In legal jargon, terra nullius means land over which no previous sovereignty has been exercised. But I think that there is a fair argument to be made that there was legal sovereignty under many different nations on the continent of Australia. Now, this is a difficult subject because that is the original sin, and this topic is explored in many different pieces of film and cinema. One thing that I can think of is the cartoon Avatar: The Last Airbender. Basically what happens is there's an invading nation, they come and they take control of the land. 3 generations later, the invading nation is fought and defeated, and the original inhabitants want their land back because they see it as their land. And I would have to agree with them. However, what do you do about the people who never took part in the war because they're the children's children of the invading force and now have created a life and often intermingled with people from both nations? They've built families and houses, established business. Perhaps in some cases, in the cartoon, they actually made the area more prosperous because now there was people who had both these abilities and those abilities and put them together, and the whole nation was much more cohesive and prosperous. This section here is titled Makarrata, and it talks about sovereignty and self-determination, which are ideas that I love, but I would love to see those concepts recognised for every individual, not just a particular group. Further down within the 26 pages, we have reform priorities. Simply put, the green section over here is what everybody agreed to. Things that are in red and yellow are either disagreed upon or inconclusive. This section here is titled Treaty, and treaty is seen as a pathway to recognition and for achieving meaningful reform. It's interesting because former Prime Minister John Howard actually has a fair bit to say about treaty.
Of making a treaty with the Indigenous. How can you make a treaty with yourself Treaties are made between sovereign nations. We have treaties with other countries. We don't have treaties with bits of ourselves, and it only has to be stated to be realised as a complete absurdity.
Now notice the way that the two camps are talking about treaty. John Howard doesn't believe you can make a treaty with yourself, and he says that because he believes that Aboriginals are Australians and you can't make a treaty between Australians and Australians. But from the Yes campaign and the Aboriginals' perspective, you can make a treaty with a sovereign nation, and they believe themselves to be a sovereign nation that's just not been recognised yet, and therefore you can make a treaty. And there lies one of the disconnects between the Yes camp and the No camp. It goes on to say, treaty would be the vehicle to achieve self-determination and autonomy and self-government. Now, I don't know if they mean self-government like a new country within a country, much like South Africa and Lesotho, or if they mean like a two systems, one nation like China with Hong Kong. Towards the very end of the document, right before the pictograms of the roadmap, we have an explanation of the roadmap, being the first stage Uluru, second stage following Uluru, and third stage Gama. Now, within the first stage, it actually outlines what the body would consist of, as in the voice to parliament. One female, one male representative from each of the 13 regions. So that's 26 people. In the fourth and fifth stage of the roadmap, Section 13 says the voice should be accommodated on appropriate site within parliamentary circle in Canberra. My question is, won't that slowly separate the regional voices from the city voices? The sixth stage of the roadmap is towards Makarrata, and the role of the National Native Title Tribunal, which would come out of the Makarrata Commission, would be to enable Truth and Reconciliation Commission to enable all Australians to face the truth of the past and embrace a common hope for the future. And then finally we have the roadmaps that I showed you at the start. Now that's all the interesting stuff that I pulled out of those 26 pages that support the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which is one page, according to me, as far as I see it. However, the document that I just showed you, the Peter Credlin report, goes on for some 100 pages. It documents all the conversations that were had between all the different groups from all the different regions, and just shows a record of conversation that informed those 26 pages, that informed the Uluru Statement. And what's in there, you don't really need to read. I mean, you can if you want. I mean, the link's in the description. This next bit you couldn't possibly know unless you're really into this shit or you watch this channel, so I'm proud to bring it to you. If we go over to the Uluru Statement from the Heart reference guide and we scroll down to the final report of the Referendum Council, it mentions in here Section 51. What's Section 51? Years ago, back in 2017, I was given a pocket constitution. I thought, I have no idea what's in here. Maybe I should know what's in here. So I read it and I highlighted a few interesting points. One of the points that they're talking about is one of the things that I highlighted. If we go on to the Australian Constitution webpage and we scroll down to the Parliament, we can click through the sections. Part 5 contains Section 51, Powers of the Parliament. So Part 5, Part 51 says, the Parliament shall, subject to the Constitution, have power to make laws for the peace, order and good government of the Commonwealth with respect to. And then we go down to Part XXVI. XXVI, so the government will have power to make laws in regards to the people of any race for whom it is deemed necessary to make special laws. Well, I thought that was a pretty crazy thing to put in there, as what it does is give the government to pass people by their race, and you can see I've highlighted it here. But what do they actually want to change it to? Well, if we go back to the Peter Credlin report, we can see that what they want to do is change the word race and replace it with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. So how it would read would be, the Parliament shall have the power to make laws for the peace, order and good government of the Commonwealth with respect to the people of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders for whom it is deemed necessary to make special laws. Now, if you told me back in 2017 that the government of 2023 would be trying to remove that section, I'd be like, yeah, that checks out. We should absolutely have nothing in there that says anything about race. People should not be divided in that fashion. But if you told me that the Prime Minister of Australia would be leading a national campaign to alter those words such that it specifically states Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people, I would have thought, no way. That person would be called a racist and shouted down. No chance that would ever get up. No chance that person would ever be elected as Prime Minister. But times have changed, and that idea is no longer considered racist, it's now considered progress. There's also a mention here of Section 122. Section 122 comes under Chapter VI, the formation of new states. If we click on that and then go Part 122, we can see Part 122 confers the powers to the Parliament to take any surrendered territory of any state and allow Parliament to make new rules and governance for that new territory, which would obviously be important in the formation of this new voice and the area that it's going to be taking up within the ACT or any other place within Australia. Now, I couldn't find any further details on alterations to 122, so if anybody has more information about that, I'd love to know about it. Scrolling down further within the Referendum Council report, we have recommendations to the government under Government Follow-up, where the committee recommends that the government follow the roadmap that's outlined within the 26 pages on the Peter Credlin report, and also recommends that the government support the process of truth-telling. So it would appear that up until this point, either through coincidence or intention, the government is following the roadmap that was provided to them by the Uluru Statement from the Heart. There's a statement before the presentation of the yes or no arguments that is from the AEC that states that the information contained has not been fact-checked by the AEC and that it is authorised by the politicians who either voted for the proposed law in the yes case or against it in the no case. One instance where I think the yes campaign says something that is misleading is these two sentences at the bottom. Other nations with similar histories like Canada and New Zealand formally recognised their own First Peoples decades ago. Experience shows there is nothing to fear and so much to gain. That's not entirely true. Canada's First Nations Assembly costs $25 billion each year, and that's doubled in size in the past 2 years. So if you're concerned about federal deficits, there is something to be concerned about. And a perfect comparison here for the No campaign, this second sentence on this page, it's a leap into the unknown. The voice has not been road tested. There is no comparable constitutional body like this anywhere in the world. Well, Canada's First Nations Assembly is a perfect comparison to the proposed voice to Parliament. Lastly, everyone should understand how a referendum works within Australia. For a change to the Constitution, you need 51% of Australia to vote yes, and you also need 4 out of the 6 states to be yes states, which means 51% of the population within that state also voted yes. If you're wondering about the 2 territories, being the Northern Territory and the ACT, those 2 territories only count in terms of population. They don't count as a state. In summary, the referendum is on the 14th of October. If you want to vote early, use this information or click the links in the description. The Yes campaign appears to me to be relying on empty platitudes and emotional arguments in order to convince its target audience. But according to the polls, the majority of Australians don't support the referendum, probably due to a lack of information and trust in the government, which is the position that I take. I simply don't trust unchecked power, and I can't see any restraints within this proposal. Perhaps that position is too cynical, perhaps the alternate position is too naive. Only time will tell. My assessment is that the Voice to Parliament is a racial lobbyist group whose sphere of influence will expand until it encroaches on another, more powerful government body's sphere of influence, at which point ambition will counteract ambition, and unofficial boundary lines will be set under a quid pro quo style arrangement, as is common in politics. My recommendation to the people is to vote no, and my recommendation to the government is, if you're going to ask that we give you more power, then you had better give us the details and show me how that power is going to be restrained and kept in check. Finally, don't let this matter or any other political issue destroy your friendships. Politicians already take enough from you. And remember, you were born free.